The dim glow of Eagle's perch spilled across the gravel lot like a tired lantern trying to hold back the night. Caleb Walsh sat stiff behind the wheel of his beat-up '98 Ford F-150, engine ticking, breath fogging the windshield. His kepi rested on the passenger seat, the dark navy fabric catching the faint reflection of the neon eagle sign above the bar. For most people, it was just a hat. For Caleb, it was armor, duty, and memory stitched into one. He thought of the tomb, the marble, the rhythm of his boots echoing against silence. Then he thought of his father's voice, gravelly from desert nights. Keep their flame alive, son. The ones without names, they're the real heroes. He pushed the door open, gravel crunching under his polished shoes, and stepped toward the bar. Inside, warmth and noise collided. A jukebox humming an old Springsteen tune, a baseball game blaring on the TV, bikers laughing over cheap beer. The smell of fried onions and cigarette smoke lingered in the air. Caleb adjusted his coat, straightened his shoulders, and carried his kepi under his arm. The bell above the door jingled, and for a heartbeat, the room fell silent. Eyes turned. A couple nods, one old-timer lifting his glass in respect. Caleb slipped onto a stool at the far end of the bar, setting the kepi down with the care of a man laying flowers at a grave. "Evening, Sergeant," the bartender said. She was young, early 20s, tattoos peeking from under rolled sleeves, her name tag reading Sarah. The eagle globe and anchor inked on her arm marked her as a Marine. Caleb's lips twitched into the faintest smile. "Coors Light," he replied, his voice low, steady. She slid the bottle across, cold foam kissing the rim. He raised it, took a long swallow and let the chill cut through the heaviness in his chest. Then a shadow fell across him. The bar owner. Rusty Baxter, mid-50s, broad-shouldered but gone soft. Gray threaded through his beard. His apron carried grease stains like old battle scars, though Caleb doubted he'd ever seen combat. Rusty's, eyes sharp and skeptical, zeroed in on the kepi resting on the counter. "We got a policy here," Rusty said flatly. "No costumes. This ain't no tourist trap." Caleb blinked, the words landing heavier than the rifle he carried on duty. "Costume? Sir, this is my uniform. Sergeant Caleb Walsh, 3rd Infantry Regiment. Just off shift at Arlington." His voice carried the quiet dignity of marble silence, but Rusty only barked a bitter laugh. "Arlington," Rusty sneered. "Marching around like wind-up toys for tourists. I've seen plenty like you. Posers in shiny blues, telling stories they never lived. Last week some clown in fake SEAL gear stiffed me for a tab. Don't bring that play acting into my bar." The room shifted. The bikers exchanged glances. Sarah froze mid-pour. In the corner, an old woman named Evelyn set down her deck of cards, her wire-rimmed glasses catching the dim light. Her voice, aged but steady, cut through Rusty's words. "That boy's kepi ain't for show," she said firmly. "My Hank bled at Chosin Reservoir. Blood earns that hat, not Hollywood." Rusty's jaw tightened, but he waved her off, turning his scorn back on Caleb. "If you're legit, prove it. What's your unit, your tours, or is this just smoke and mirrors?" Caleb's eyes stayed locked on Rusty's, unwavering, the way they did on the tomb. Memories flared. Fallujah, smoke and fire, dragging brothers out of ambush. His father's journal heavy in his coat pocket. He set his beer down gently, the glass tapping like a muted drum. 2 tours Iraq. Lost my lieutenant. Pulled my squad out under fire. This uniform. It's not for me. It's for the ones who never made it home. For my father, who wore it in the Gulf and came back hollow. He ended his life in our garage when I was 16. All I ask is to drink my beer in peace. In his memory. The silence was thick. One of the bikers leaned in, voice gravelly but certain. "If that kepi's fake, Rusty, I'll trade my Harley for a Vespa. Boy's got the eyes, seen the elephant." But Rusty's face hardened like stone. "Stories. Everyone's got one. Out. Now. Before I call the cops. We pour for real Americans here, not dress-up dolls." Caleb gathered the kepi, his movements measured, deliberate. He gave Sarah a nod of thanks, Evelyn a small bow of respect, and drained the last of his beer. Without another word, he walked to the door. The bell jingled once more as it shut. Behind him, the echo hollow as his father's garage that night long ago. Outside, the autumn air bit cold against his skin. He stared at the kepi in his hands, whispering to the empty lot. "Why'd you leave me guarding alone, Dad?" Then, he slid into the truck, started the engine, and drove off into the Arlington dusk. The night wrapped itself around Caleb's truck as he drove aimlessly down Route 50, the neon smear of Eagle's Perch shrinking in his rearview mirror. The radio whispered static, unable to hold a station. His knuckles clenched the wheel, pale, against the black leather, while the kepi lay on the passenger seat like a silent companion. Each mile felt heavier, the bar owner's words echoing. Costume, dress-up doll. Caleb had heard worse in Iraq, in Arlington, even whispered in the silence of his own mind. But tonight, they cut deeper, because they weren't just insults. They were doubts. He slowed near the cemetery gates. Beyond the wrought iron fence, Arlington stretched in perfect rows, endless white markers standing like frozen soldiers. The moonlight cast long shadows across the stones, making them look like a silent parade. Caleb parked, grabbed his kepi, and stepped out. His boots sank into the soft earth as he crossed into the stillness. Every sound, wind brushing the leaves, the distant hum of the highway, felt muted here. He walked to the tomb. Though off duty, his steps instinctively fell into rhythm, heel, toe, pause. He approached the marble sarcophagus with reverence, the words etched deep. "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God." Caleb's throat tightened. He set the kepi against the cold stone and lowered his head. "Dad," he whispered, voice breaking. "I tried. I carry you with me. But tonight, they called it fake. They called you fake." His breath shook, clouding in the chill. He pressed a hand against the marble. "You left me with this weight, and I don't know if I can keep holding it." A sudden crunch of gravel snapped him back. He turned. Sarah, the bartender, stood a few paces away, a jacket thrown over her bar uniform. Her breath puffed white in the night. "You drive like a man with ghosts on your tail," she said softly. Caleb straightened, instinctively wiping his eyes. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she countered, nodding toward the tomb. "But I figured you'd come. You've got the look of someone who doesn't quit at the first punch." He studied her, wary but grateful for the interruption. "Why follow me?" She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Rusty's a bastard, but he ain't entirely wrong. This town, we've been burned before. Guys walking in with fake medals, scamming veterans' charities, telling lies to get free drinks. He's hardened. Still, what he said tonight crossed a line." Caleb exhaled slowly. "And you? You believed him?" Sarah shook her head. "I've seen real eyes. Eyes that carry weight. You've got them." She looked at the tomb, her voice quieter. "I had a brother, KIA in Helmand, 2011. They sent back a folded flag, nothing else. Every time I ink another anchor on my arm, it's for him. I know what's real when I see it." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Caleb looked at her and for the first time in hours felt less alone. "I'm sorry about your brother," he said. She nodded, blinking back the sting in her eyes. "I'm sorry about your dad." They stood there, two shadows against marble, bound by grief and duty. Then headlights swept across the cemetery. A black SUV rolled slowly past the gates before disappearing down the road. Sarah frowned. "That's the third time I've seen that car near the bar this week. Same plates, same slow crawl." Caleb's jaw tightened. His instincts, sharpened in war, hummed. "You sure?" She nodded. "Yeah. Whoever's in it, they're watching." Caleb picked up his kepi, eyes narrowing toward the dark road. Then maybe Rusty's suspicions weren't the only thing wrong tonight. The wind picked up, carrying dead leaves across the stones. Caleb set his gaze on the horizon. Trouble was coming, and Arlington would not be spared. The morning broke cold and gray, rain slicking the streets of Arlington in a fine mist. Caleb stood at his locker inside the barracks, methodically polishing his shoes until the black leather mirrored his face. Ritual steadied him. Every stroke, every inspection was a prayer of order against the chaos clawing at his thoughts. The memory of the SUV lingered like smoke, too deliberate to ignore. Sergeant Hayes, his section leader, leaned in through the doorway. A stocky man with cropped hair and a voice that could cut glass, he studied Caleb. "You look like hell, Walsh. Something on your mind?" Caleb hesitated, then told him about the SUV. Hayes listened, arms folded. "Could be nothing. Could be something. Either way, your focus stays here. The tomb doesn't forgive distraction." "I know, Sergeant," Caleb replied, standing straighter. Hours later, Caleb took his post. The drizzle had thickened into steady rain, pattering on his shoulders and soaking the brim of his kepi. Yet his steps fell flawlessly. 21 paces, pause, turn, 21 paces back. Tourists huddled under umbrellas, watching in silence. Cameras clicked, but Caleb's eyes never strayed. He was marble, steel, and duty. Still, his peripheral vision caught a flicker, a black SUV parked just beyond the visitor lot. Windows tinted, engine idling. Caleb's pulse quickened, but his body betrayed not. When relief came, Caleb stepped off post, muscles stiff from hours in rain. Sarah waited near the gates, her hair damp, jacket pulled tight. "I saw it too," she said quietly, nodding toward the SUV. "It's the same one." Before Caleb could answer, a low growl of motorcycles split the air. A pack of bikers rolled into the lot, engines snarling. At their head was Evelyn's nephew, Mike, a burly man in a leather vest, an American flag patch on his back. They parked in a line, water dripping from chrome. "Word travels fast," Mike said, pulling off his helmet. "Evelyn told me what happened at the bar. Nobody disrespects a tomb guard on my watch." He jerked his chin toward the SUV. "And that don't sit right either." The SUV's engine revved once, then peeled away into traffic. Caleb exhaled slowly, torn between gratitude and unease. He wasn't used to being defended. It felt foreign, almost fragile. Mike clapped him on the shoulder. "You stand for the fallen. We stand for you." The bikers nodded in agreement, a silent wall of support. Sarah looked at Caleb, her eyes steady. "See, you're not alone in this." For the first time since Rusty's words cut him down, Caleb allowed himself to believe it. Still, as the rain tapered off and the sun broke weakly through the clouds, he knew the shadows had only just begun to gather. The next evening, Caleb found himself driving back toward Eagle's Perch. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles pale under the dash lights. Part of him wanted to stay away, to let the humiliation of that night fade. But another part, stronger, stubborn, demanded he return. The bar wasn't just a place anymore. It was a fault line, and he had to cross it. When he pushed through the heavy wooden doors, the air inside carried the smell of fried food, spilled beer, and smoke clinging to denim jackets. Conversation dimmed when people saw him in uniform. Rusty Baxter was behind the bar, polishing a glass that didn't need polishing. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak first. Caleb stepped forward, kepi under his arm. His voice was calm but iron-edged. "We need to talk." Rusty's lip curled. "Didn't I make myself clear? No costumes in here." A few patrons shifted uncomfortably, but no one laughed. Sarah appeared from behind the counter, her eyes flicking between them. Caleb's calm cracked for a moment, anger rising. "That uniform isn't a costume. It's earned with sweat, with blood, with silence. You think I wear it for attention? I wear it because men like my father never came home." The bar went quiet. Rusty's hand stilled on the glass. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Uncertainty, maybe even shame. But it hardened quickly. Plenty of liars walk in here with stories like that. "How do I know you're different?" Before Caleb could answer, the door banged open. Mike and 3 bikers entered, their vests damp from drizzle, boots heavy on the wood floor. "Because he is different," Mike said flatly. "He stands guard over men who'll never tell their stories. That's more than most of us can say." Evelyn, the elderly woman from the first night, raised her glass. "Hear, hear." A few others murmured agreement. The tide in the room shifted. Caleb looked Rusty in the eye. "I don't need your approval, but I won't let you disrespect what I stand for. Not me, not the ones who came before." Rusty slammed the glass onto the counter. For a second, Caleb thought the man might swing, but Rusty only leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "You don't know what I've seen, what I've lost. You think you've cornered the market on grief? The words landed heavy. Caleb realized then that Rusty's anger wasn't just prejudice, it was pain, festering too long. But before he could answer, the low rumble of an engine cut through the night. Everyone turned as headlights swept across the bar's windows. The black SUV. Again. It slowed, lingered, then rolled away. Silence pressed in after it. Caleb's gut tightened. This was no coincidence. Rusty's eyes flicked toward the window, then back at Caleb. For the first time, doubt crept into his glare. Sarah broke the silence. "Whoever's in that SUV, they're circling us. And it's not by chance." The bar felt smaller suddenly, every patron aware of the danger outside. Caleb straightened, his voice steady. "Then we'd better be ready, because this isn't just about me anymore." The storm broke the following day. Thunder rolled over Arlington, rain lashing down in sheets that blurred the skyline. Caleb stood under the barracks awning, his uniform coat buttoned tight, watching rivulets of water snake across the pavement. He should have felt calm. Rain always steadied him during deployments, but today it carried only weight. The SUV's constant presence gnawed at his mind. Whoever circled the bar, the tomb, the streets, they weren't finished. Sergeant Hayes called formation, voice booming against the storm. "Eyes front!" Precision isn't weather-dependent. Precision is eternal. The old guard fell in line, boots striking puddles in unison. Caleb moved among them, flawless as always, but his gaze kept flicking to the perimeter. The SUV wasn't there, but absence felt like no relief at all. After drill, Caleb retreated to his locker. Inside, folded carefully, lay his father's journal. He sat on the bench, flipping it open. The pages smelled of leather and ink, filled with his father's neat script. One line caught his eye. "If the world doubts you, let your steps answer." A soldier's silence is louder than a crowd. Caleb closed the book, chest tightening. A knock startled him. Sarah stood in the doorway, hair damp from rain, a nervous energy in her stance. "I shouldn't be here, but—" She glanced around before stepping inside. "That SUV? It was outside my apartment last night. Parked there for hours." Caleb's jaw clenched. "They're following you now." Before she could respond, Mike and two bikers appeared behind her, dripping rain onto the floor. Mike's expression was grim. "We ran the plates. Vehicles registered to a shell company in D.C. No real name, no address. Somebody doesn't want to be found." The room fell into silence. Caleb felt the tension in his gut solidify into certainty. This wasn't random harassment. This was deliberate surveillance. But why him? Why the tomb? Hayes entered then, his presence sharp as a blade. His eyes swept over Sarah and the bikers, then locked on Caleb. "I don't like civilians in my barracks, but if what they say is true, you're in the middle of something bigger than pride." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not fighting this alone." "The guard stands together." Caleb nodded slowly. The weight of his father's journal pressed against his side like an anchor. "Then maybe it's time to show them what standing together looks like." The rain hammered harder outside, thunder shaking the windows. Shadows gathered, not just on the streets, but in every heart in the room. Caleb knew the storm was only beginning. Sunday morning dawned with a sharp chill, the storm clouds having broken overnight. Arlington's sky was pale blue, but the air still carried the dampness of the storm. Caleb woke early, lacing his boots with deliberate care, his father's journal tucked safely into his coat pocket. The words from the night before echoed in his chest, standing together. By the time he reached the parking lot, engines were already rumbling. Trucks and motorcycles lined up in loose formation, soldiers and bikers alike preparing in silence. 30 men and women, all in crisp navy coats and polished shoes, kepis glinting beneath the pale sun. Sarah was there too, jacket zipped, standing with the bikers. Her eyes found Caleb's and she gave a quick nod. Marcus strode down the line, his presence steady as a commander before battle. "No speeches," he said, voice low but carrying. "We move quiet. We honor the flame." Today isn't about fighting Rusty Baxter. It's about reminding everyone watching that silence is strength. Engines roared to life, the convoy pulling onto the road like a slow-moving tide. The line of vehicles stretched along the parkway, turning heads as they passed. No horns, no sirens, only the low growl of engines and the rhythmic pulse of unity. Caleb drove near the front, hands tight on the wheel, Sarah's bike headlights shining in his mirror. When they arrived at Eagle's Perch, the lot was already busy. Tourists, bikers from the night before, and a scattering of locals who had heard whispers of what was coming. The bar's neon eagle sign flickered weakly in the daylight. Caleb parked his truck, stepped out, and placed his kepi carefully on his head. The group formed a line before the flagpole out front. The stars and stripes snapped sharply in the morning breeze. At Marcus's signal, 30 rifles rose in unison. The motion was crisp, synchronized, a salute not for battle but for memory. The crowd fell silent. Even the children among the tourists stopped fidgeting. Rusty Baxter emerged from the doorway, his apron stained, face pale. He froze when he saw the line of guards, his eyes darting from face to face, then to the crowd gathering around. The weight of their silence pressed down harder than any accusation. Caleb stepped forward slowly, not breaking formation but letting his presence carry. He laid his father's journal on the bar's steps, a symbol not of anger but of history. Rusty's lips trembled. For a moment he looked like he might shout, but no words came. Instead, Evelyn shuffled from the crowd, her cards clutched in one hand. She placed them gently on the journal. "Respect," she said simply. The air seemed to shift. For the first time, Rusty lowered his eyes, not in defeat but in shame. Caleb felt his chest tighten, not with victory but with something quieter, deeper. His father's flame wasn't flickering alone anymore. The silence stretched, heavy but sacred. And in that silence a promise was sealed. The tomb guard never walked alone. The air outside Eagle's Perch still carried the weight of silence when the guards filed inside. Boots clicked softly against the wooden floor. Conversations died. The jukebox was cut mid-song. Every head turned. Sarah slipped behind the bar, her hands shaking slightly as she polished glasses that were already clean. Evelyn sat near the corner, laying her cards with deliberate patience. Caleb chose the same stool as before, placing his kepi carefully on the counter. No words were spoken. The stillness was more powerful than any confrontation. Rusty Baxter froze near the cooler, a crate of beer bottles clutched in his hands. His face was pale, sweat running down his temples. His eyes darted from soldier to soldier, from bikers to tourists. His grip faltered. The crate thudded to the floor, bottles rattling but not breaking. "You," his voice cracked. "This is some kind of stunt. You trying to shame me in my own place?" His words were sharp, but they lacked the steel from the night before. Marcus stepped forward, posture calm, voice even. "No stunt, no threats, just a watch. Silent like the tomb. You disrespected one of ours, his father's flame. We don't let that pass in silence." Rusty's jaw worked as if chewing invisible glass. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." Evelyn's voice cut through the air, steady as stone. "We know enough. Your brother went to Nam, didn't come back. And you ran, hid in Toronto. You've been hiding ever since." The bar seemed to shrink around them. Rusty's eyes went wide, his hand gripping the edge of the counter to steady himself. Don't you dare!" His words faltered. Caleb felt the moment hang, the weight of history pressing down. He reached into his coat and pulled out the journal. The cracked leather seemed to glow in the dim light. He opened it to a page and placed it gently on the counter for all to see. His father's words written in blocky script. "The flame flickers, but it doesn't die. Sons carry it when fathers fall." Rusty's eyes locked on the page. His lips moved silently as if repeating the words. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. For the first time, his voice came soft, almost broken. "I burned mine. My draft card, my letters, everything. Thought if I killed it, the guilt would die too. But it never did." The bar remained silent, but the silence had changed. It was no longer an accusation. It was a mirror. Rusty stood in its reflection, and the truth weighed heavier than any uniform. Evelyn laid her final card on the table with a soft tap. "Respect is earned, Rusty, and right now it's standing all around you." Rusty's knees bent slightly like the weight might topple him. But instead of collapsing, he straightened, eyes wet, and whispered, "To the flame." Caleb raised his bottle, voice firm but quiet. "To the flame." 30 voices echoed back, resonant and unshakable. To the flame. The walls of Eagle's Perch, once just a bar, now held something sacred. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds of Eagle's Perch. The storm had passed, leaving the streets washed clean, puddles glittering like fragments of glass. The air smelled of wet asphalt and pine. Inside the bar, silence lingered, but it was no longer heavy. It felt earned. Caleb sat at the counter, his father's journal resting beneath his hand. The cracked leather seemed lighter now, as if last night's echo had lifted some of its weight. Around him, guards finished their coffee in quiet fellowship. No one spoke of the SUV that had haunted them, or the faceless eyes behind tinted glass. It didn't matter now. The confrontation had shifted from streets and shadows to something deeper, something Rusty could no longer run from. Rusty emerged from the back room, shoulders slumped, but eyes steadier than before. His voice gravelly carried across the room. "I can't undo what I did, or what I didn't do, but I can stop hiding." He placed an old dust-covered box on the counter. Inside were relics, dog tags, folded letters, a faded photograph of a young soldier in jungle fatigues. "My brother. Name was James. Never talked about him after Nam. Maybe I was afraid the silence would break me." Sarah stepped forward, resting a hand on the box. "Silence doesn't erase, it holds. Sometimes it holds us together." The guards watched quietly, each recognizing a truth they carried in their own ways. Caleb opened the journal once more, letting Rusty see another line his father had written. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing still in its presence." Rusty's jaw trembled, but this time no words were needed. He nodded, slow and deliberate, as if saluting a memory he had long denied. Evelyn shuffled her cards back into their case, her voice calm, final. "The flame's yours to carry, Rusty. Doesn't matter how late you pick it up. What matters is you don't drop it again." The guards rose in unison, bottles set down, kepis lifted. Caleb followed, stepping into the morning air. The streets of Arlington stretched ahead, sunlight piercing the remnants of storm clouds. The SUV was gone. Perhaps it had never mattered. What mattered was the unity forged inside that bar, stronger than fear, sharper than silence. As Caleb walked toward the tomb, journal pressed against his side, he could almost feel his father's presence, steady, watchful, proud. The flame endured, and now so would he.